Hi, I'm Matt Nicol, and I'm here to give you the top 40 home buyers questions in the Worcestershire area. We're going to go through the questions and give you the answers. First up, what surveys do I need? So there's three types of surveys primarily that people often have. They have a valuation survey, which is simply just to confirm the value of the property. Often that's suitable for most lenders. That's when they're going to lend you money for the purchase. They want a valuation survey. So a surveyor says that it's worth the money the building society are willing to lend you. You then have a home buyer survey. And a home buyer survey works on a traffic light system. So basically, if it's got any major issues, then it'll be a red. If it's not too bad, then it'll be an amber. And if it's okay and there's no problems to worry about, then it'll be green. They go through all the items in the property, including things like downpipes, guttering, damp course, windows, any cracks or anything like that would be picked up in this as well. You've got to bear in mind that when you read a home buyer survey that it is black and white. It's a very matter of fact. So sometimes you can read something, it can concern you, but actually, properties do move over time, and it might well just be that that it just needs a bit of paint or a bit of decoration to solve the problem. Finally, there's a full structural survey. And a full structural survey is the more expensive of the three. This would obviously be recommended if you're buying a property that's old, typically, or if you can see any signs of movement, be that kind of cracking through the mortar on the brickwork or windows moving. Full structural survey is probably the best recommendation for that. So those are the three different types of surveys. It depends on what you're buying. There's three types to choose from. Next up in our most popular questions from home buyers in the Worcestershire area is the question, what is conveyancing? So conveyancing is the process from when your offer gets accepted through to the part where you complete on the purchase. That is the conveyancing process. So it's the part where the solicitors are engaged. You also, if you're getting a mortgage, you'll be having your mortgage surveys carried out. But the conveyancing, really, the solicitors employed to work for you, but they're also working for your lender. So they want to make sure that you're buying a property that has no hidden problems, any issues that you wouldn't be aware of. They're obviously experts in this field. They take their time to read through the searches, which are for the local area around your property, and they'll be ensuring that they're asking the right questions of the existing vendor who's selling to you to ensure that you don't buy something that has a problem in the future. That's what the conveyancing process is. It can unfortunately take a while. At the moment, it's taking upwards of 14 weeks, which is far longer than it should be realistically. But there's things that you can do to help speed that up. If you want some more tips and advice, get in touch with us and we'll be happy to help out. We're answering the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And the next question is, what are searches? What searches do I require as a buyer? Essentially, there's three main ones. There's the local search. The local search is there to look at what is planned to be built in the local vicinity, any applications that are pending, anything that you need to be aware of before you purchase your property. The environmental search is to look at what the ground is made up of, whether there's any brine there. It could be that because of Indroit, which there is a lot of brine, that's something that you need to be aware of, not something to concern yourself about, because the makeup of the rafts that the properties were built on actually covers for brine. And then you've also got things like radon gas that might come up in an environmental search. And the final one is the water and drainage search, which, as you can imagine, is to do with how water will run away from your property and waste will run away from your property also. So this is something your solicitor will instruct that they need to get carried out on your behalf. There's a charge for this. It's often the one thing that you do need to pay for up front, typically around £300 to £350. So when you instruct your solicitor, you can expect to need that money to be sent across to them swiftly. There are other searches, including mining or chancel search, but your solicitor can advise whether they're recommended or required. Well, they will cost more, of course, so you need to be aware of those costs if you are to go for that. Hope that helps. If you have any comments or questions, please drop them in the box below. Next up on the top 40 most asked questions from home buyers in the Worcestershire area, what can I afford? It's a great question. It's not an easy one to work out for yourself, but what you do obviously know for yourself is what you're bringing home each month. So if you have a consistent income, say a basic salary that has no commission additions to it, then you'll need to know exactly what that looks like over the course of the year and what your monthly earning and take home is. If you're in a job where you do earn commission, you may want to take an average over a period of time, maybe 3 to 6 months. Now, if you go to see a bank or building society, they'll be interested in knowing all of your income. So any income that you have, whether that's just through those sources or any kind of child maintenance money that you're also receiving, and they'll take that figure, put it into their computer, and from that they'll be able to work out what your affordability is. Now, for them to work out what your affordability is, they're also going to need to know what your outgoings are. So if you have student loans or existing credit card debt, or if you have car loans that you need to pay off, then you may want to consider sorting those out to give you a better affordability on your next purchase. Obviously, you need to do what's affordable to you. Don't take out a loan to pay off a loan necessarily, but the less outgoings you have at the point when you go to see your bank or building society, the better it will be for you in terms of your affordability and your borrowing power. Next up on the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area, how do I choose a solicitor? There's a number of ways you can choose a solicitor, and like most things, we'd recommend you go off recommendations. So if you speak to a friend or family member or even work colleagues and see if they've moved in recent years and whether they've used a solicitor they would recommend to you, that could be a great way to find it for yourself. Alternatively, as an estate agent, we have 4 solicitors that we recommend, and we'd be happy to give you an opportunity to get quotes from each of those. Now, clearly, we recommend them because they give us a good level of service. If the level of service was not good enough for us, then we wouldn't be recommending them to you. Finally, check on Google. It's a great way of doing your own research. You can read the Google reviews. And when you do contact them, if you do that in person or over the phone, it's how do you feel that they've looked after you at that very first point? Are they answering your questions from the outset? There are some cheap opportunities out there. They're essentially call centres that do a lot of the work and then pass it to the solicitor at the very end. We'd steer clear of those, if I'm honest with you. It's a stressful time trying to buy a property. So the least amount of stress you can get, the better. And using a solicitor that's going to answer your questions is one of those things that will save you a lot of heartache in the long run. If you have any more questions, drop them in the comments box below. Next up, in the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area, do I need to have a survey? If you're buying with a mortgage, yes, you do. And it's the lenders that really want you to have that survey, because essentially they're often putting up the most money for this. If you're putting down 20% deposit yourself, it's 80% of their money that's going into the purchase. So they want to make sure that the property you're purchasing is worth the value that you're paying for it, but also it doesn't have any major problems that are going to cause it an issue, which therefore could actually devalue it and lose some of their 80% that they put in. So you've got 3 different surveys. We've already done a question that's answered what those 3 surveys are. So you can look for those on YouTube. But essentially, most will want you to have a valuation survey. If you're buying an older property, if you're buying something like 1930s, 40s or 50s, then I'd probably recommend having a home buyer survey. You can have that on something that's 5 years old if you wish. Home buyer survey gives a traffic light warning system really on any items that need to be fixed. Bear in mind that actually a home buyer survey can look worse than it really is. If they haven't had the electrics checked within the last 12 months, it'll put it down as a red. Realistically, it just needs an electrician just to go through and check those things, but it's bringing that to your attention. And then finally, a full structural survey can be had if it's a larger property, if it's an older property as in Victorian or kind of predating Victorian times, then it may well be that you'll need to have a full structural survey. But really, it's down to the lender's choice. Most lenders just want you to have a valuation survey. Another thing you can do when you're buying a property is, rather than just having that valuation survey through the lender, ask your broker if they can change that and bump it up to a home buyer. So it costs you some more money, but it makes sense. Rather than having 2 different surveyors go out to the property, you can get it done in one go. Any other questions, drop them in the comments box below. Question we've been asked in the top 40 most asked questions from home buyers in the Worcestershire area: how long should I fix my mortgage for? Should it be a 2-year fixed, a 3-year fixed, a 5-year fixed, or longer? Now, it's clear that at the moment, when this is being recorded, we're in August, interest rates have been rising. This is 2022, and interest rates have been rising. The Bank of England base rate has increased a couple of times already, and we're expecting it to continue towards the end of this year. Therefore, for me personally, I'd be recommending at least a 3-year fixed deal, because actually what you'll find is you'll get comfortable with the payments. And then when you come to do your remortgage in 3 years' time, of course, we don't know what would have happened with the market necessarily. You'll be coming back in at a point where possibly inflation has started to drop off and the interest rates have started to come down. We are expecting that interest rates will come down in the next 2 years. However, I wouldn't want to be that person that tells you to go for a 2-year fixed and find that it costs you in the long run. Now, I've done 5 years and 3-year fixed in the past, and I've never had an issue with that decision that I've made there. It means you get into a very comfortable position. You know what your outgoings are and you can budget for it. So if you're looking at doing mortgages at the moment, speak to your broker. They'll give you their own advice. There are actually longer fixed deals than just 5 years. You can go 10 years and plus. But for me personally, I'd say around 3-year fixed is the best way to go. We're recording the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And the next one, how much notice will I be given about the moving date? It depends on who you're buying through. If I'm very honest with you, this can be a very, very tricky one, because some estate agents will have their own sales progression team. Others will have their sales members of staff actually doing the sales progression amongst their other jobs, which I find very, very tricky to believe that they can do a great job at that, because it's so much to do. But I'd say that sales progressor and your solicitor are going to be the best people to advise you. Now, we have had situations in the past where we've learned that people in the chains have already given notice on their rental too early, have not organised things like removals in time, and it's caused lots of stress and heartache. What I would suggest in your chain, it's always worth at the earliest possible stage asking for a suggested completion date. Don't bank on it, because there's things that can stop these things from happening, but at least have a suggested move-in date that people are working towards. You will need to get quotations if you're going to use a removal company. You're going to need to give them time to come out to see your property to provide you with a quote. You're also going to need to know what their diary is going to be like for that date and maybe have it penciled in. But like I said, I think it's best practice to make sure that there's at least a kind of a long stop date that people are working towards. And then hopefully, as you're getting close towards that date, you can be asking if things have been done. Your sales progressor, if you're buying through Nicol Co, will be looking after your purchase so that they will be checking that things are going on the right path to ensure that the date's going to get met. And they'll be giving you regular updates to let you know what's happening there. But in terms of booking removals, sometimes you don't get much notice. I'd do as much as you can as early as possible to at least know those numbers and be ready for it. Hope that helps. Next question in the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. Why is property buying so much hassle? Very, very good question. We do as much as we can to reduce the amount of hassle, but it's fair to say that it's not for the faint-hearted. Firstly, I think it's the emotions involved. If you're selling or buying, there's a lot going on. A lot of it for you guys is going to be unknown as well. Clearly, as an estate agent, we do this day in, day out. I've been doing it for 17 years myself, and we can help you with some of the questions you've got. We're doing this piece to make sure that you have some answers already. But the hassle factor comes from things like third parties, unfortunately. So your solicitor's acting in your best interest to make sure that you're not going to buy something that's going to fall down a week later or have any issues. But they need to go off to people like the local authority to get the answers back for things like the searches. Those things should take a couple of weeks. If you do a personal search, they can be a lot quicker, but they actually take anything between 2 to 6 weeks. That adds time to the process. Also, buying with a mortgage, you obviously need to prove your wealth to the lender. They need to know what your income is and what your outgoings are as well. And this again has an impact on time. The other thing is you're reliant on other people within the chain. It can't always just be first-time buyer buying from someone who's got nothing to sell and that's it. You often have 2 or 3 or 4 links in the chain. That's where an agent like ours comes in, because we have a sales progressor that looks after every single section. Whilst we look after ours specifically, we can go up and down the chain to find out what's going on in both of those areas. So I'm sorry to say it's not for the faint-hearted. It is worth doing though. Buying a property is still one of the best decisions you'll ever make. And so grit your teeth, go for it. And if we can help in any way, we'd be more than happy to. We're answering the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And the next one we're looking at is, how do I know what's the best mortgage for me? It's a great question. Everyone's different. Everyone, wants different things from their mortgage provider. And that's one thing that we can really help out with. If you just go to your bank or building society that you actually have your accounts with, the only thing they can do is tell you what they offer themselves. They're not going to recommend anyone else to you, and they're not going to give you any understanding of what their rates are or how their rates compare to others. They may offer you some exclusive deals, which I'll come back to in a minute. Now, we have independent brokers. We don't employ them. They're actually external to our company, but they are Home of Mortgages and Nick Marsh from MAB. And as a result of having access to both of those, we are able to go to the whole of the market. Now, the importance of that is our advisors don't get paid anything in particular by sticking you with one certain lender. We actually want you to get the very, very best possible advice. And that might mean for you that one lender is going to be the perfect one, whereas it wouldn't be the right fit for me. It can change between different lenders. Some take into account your commission if you're on a commission-based income, versus others that might take in tax credits or child allowance and bits and pieces. So when you speak to an independent broker, what they'll do with their years of experience is they'll be able to assess the whole of the market for you, tell you what each of the offers are, what each of the rates are that are out there. There's some 12,000 different rates available. So let them do the walking for you, let them do all the searching for you, and they'll be able to advise you on what the very best mortgage is going to be for you. We're heading through the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And the next one on the list is, what is indemnity insurance and why do you need it? So indemnity insurance basically is to say that one party will compensate the other party for any loss that they came to. Now, the reason you might have to have indemnity insurance is because you may have done, or the vendor of the home that you're looking to purchase made some changes to that property. And when they did that, they didn't have the correct building regs or sign off done on that property, and they can indemnify against that work. Now, indemnifying against that work will mean that you'll still want to have your own checks carried out. Clearly, you would have had your survey carried out, but you will have an insurance policy that basically means that when you come to sell the property in the future, bearing in mind the previous owner that had done the work didn't have the right paperwork, you're then indemnified again, to pass that on to the next purchaser. There's a number of different indemnity policies that will be required sometimes during a purchase. It is clearly your decision on whether you are happy to go with the indemnity policy being put in place, but your solicitor can advise you on the result of that and whether they would recommend that personally to you as well. So speak to your solicitor. Of course, they are the people that you are paying to do the job for you, and it isn't a bad thing to take out or let someone take out an indemnity insurance on something, but just make sure that they feel comfortable that you're doing the right thing by pursuing and proceeding with the property. Top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. The next one we have, what's the difference between a mortgage decision in principle and a mortgage offer? So in essence, the mortgage offer is when you've had the survey carried out on the property that you're looking to purchase. All your other previous checks have been done. It's gone through underwriters and all of the financial side bits and pieces are all organised. And the mortgage offer is the final offer to say, we will lend you this amount of money to purchase this property. It's basically the house's value they want it to be, and they are happy with everything. So therefore your offer is there. The money is basically in the account with the bank, building society, allocated to you. Now, don't just get to draw down on that money straight away. They actually need 5 days notice normally as a minimum to get that money from having a mortgage offer to then getting the money to the solicitor for them to be able to do what they'll need to do for a completion. The mortgage decision in principle is as it sounds, really. They're essentially saying, based on the information that you provided to either them directly or via your broker, they are offering you a mortgage decision in principle, subject to valuation, subject to checking your pay slips, subject to the underwriter being happy with everything that has been submitted and keyed in on the system. So those are the two things. You'll get a mortgage decision in principle early, and most estate agents, when they're acting on behalf of their vendors, when you make an offer to them on a property, they'll want to know that you've got a mortgage decision in principle first before they recommend their vendor property can be removed from the market. Because if you had just done an online calculator, had done some figures yourself, and then found out actually it wasn't taking into account your commission, the lender that you wanted to use wasn't going to allow for the fact you had a bonus last year, then actually that's the thing that could have affected your borrowing. And we've had situations in the past where chains have collapsed, where mortgage decision in principles weren't received at the very beginning. We're going through the 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And the next one is, what is stamp duty? So stamp duty is a tax paid to the government when you purchase a property. It ranges anything between 2 to 12%, and it starts with a threshold at £125,000. Now, if you are a landlord or if you're buying an additional property, it actually starts at 0 for you. And every single percent point that it moves up, it also has an additional 3% as an investor. So that's something you need to consider when you're buying an investment property. We'll put a table on the screen to show you what the thresholds are. And this money needs to be paid across upon completion for the purchase price of the property. So it's the agreed sales price that you've got on that property. You don't need to find out where to pay it for yourself. Your solicitor, as part of your completion statement, will ask you for the money to be paid across to their account, and then they will complete the purchase and also pay that money for the stamp duty upon completion. We're flying through the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. Next question, what does it mean if the vendor doesn't have correct paperwork for the home? For example, boiler certificate are out of date. Now, this can happen. As homeowners, you don't think about the servicing all the time of your appliances and items, but when you come to sell a property, your purchaser solicitor is often going to be asking that all of these documents are in place. Now, they don't have to be in place, and it completely is up to you. As a purchaser, you may be happy enough to go around there and check it out yourself and give your own opinion on whether you're happy with it. But if you do want to have a service document, then you need to consider whether that's something that you're willing to pay for, or whether you're requesting that the vendor has to pay for it. With us, we have sales progression team, so you can ask the sales progression team if that document's in place. We actually have a consultation service that we have with all of our vendors when they come to the market called Ready to Sell. We're the only ones in the area that do this, and basically means that Simon Bishop, who's a former solicitor himself, will go out to see each of our vendors that are selling their home, get all of their paperwork together, and make a note of any documents that are missing. They then, obviously the vendor has time to go off to find those bits of paperwork and provide it to him or to us, and we get it to their solicitor. So we try to tackle as many of those items that are missing at the very beginning. As I said, back to the question, if you wanted to make sure the boiler certificate was in date, then you'd be more than welcome to approach the vendor and offer that you would pay for it yourself, or if you're going to ask that they pay for it themselves, clearly that's a negotiation point that you might want to do via your estate agent. Hope that helps. We're going through the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. If you have any yourself, drop them in the comments box below and we'll make sure we record an answer for you. Question is, how much deposit will I need? Now, that's something that you will organise with your broker or with your lender, because the lenders have different rates available to you based on how much borrowing you need from them and how much deposit you're willing to put in. You'll sometimes see LTV and a percentage, that's loan to value. So how much loan are they putting in versus the value of the property? Your deposit could be 10%, could be 15%, could be 5%, could be 60%. The higher the deposit amount you put in, typically the better the rates are from the lender, because ultimately they're at lower risk because they're putting less of their own money into that purchase. Hope that helps on how much deposit will you need. Speak to your broker. They should be able to advise you on what it's worth putting down. It could be that you get to about 15%, but you have a chance to get to 20% and the costs come down significantly, so it's worth going for. One question we get asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area is, how soon after I've completed on a purchase will I get the keys? So the completion often takes place on a Friday. I don't know why it's always a Friday. Maybe it's because of the weekend afterwards, but they're often on a Friday. And the way that it works, on the day of the completion, the money will start at the bottom of the chain. So the first person that's purchasing in the chain will get their money across from their solicitor into the account for the next person. This money is a combination of deposit that's obviously going to be from the buyer themselves, plus their mortgage monies, which would have been requested from the lender. Now, that money, as you can imagine, then has to make its way up the chain. Now, if it goes to the next point and they're putting more money themselves, that money gets collected together and it goes up to the next one, and. But in terms of getting the keys for the property you're looking to purchase, we have to be aware that the homeowner in the first home will be homeless from the point at which the sale's gone through to their buyer, and not able to move into the next one until they have the call to say they can get the keys. So often on the day of completion, you need to have a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of understanding. It's typically around lunchtime that most things get concluded. So that's around the time when you were able to come into the office to get the keys. Our sales progressors will always call you to keep you informed. If the vendor's just having a quick tidy up at the end or needs to leave a couple of bits on the front lawn whilst it means they can get away from the property, we will let you know that. What we've always found in the past is, whilst you might get loaded up straight away in the morning, I'd find yourself somewhere safe and secure that you can go and sit. So if you're using a removal firm, they probably have places they can go to anyway. If you go and sit on the end of the drive of the house you're buying, it adds a bit of tension, really, because it puts a bit of pressure on the vendor that's there, and that's not really needed on a day that's already stressful enough, and also often emotional because they're leaving their family home that they've obviously spent some time in. So on the day of completion, you'll get the keys as soon as we're able to give them over. We often ask there's a bit of understanding. Whilst you would have completed on your purchase of the property, we always like the property to be empty before we give you your key to get into it. And there's often a lot of communication on the day just to make sure that you know what's going on and what the timescales are. Unfortunately, there's sometimes been cases where banks or building societies have taken too long to get the money out, and therefore payments have gone in right at the tail end of the day. But some Nicol Co staff, I'll be honest with you, have been known to actually go and help on the day and move some of the stuff in to make it less stressful for the buyer or for the vendor that's leaving. So we do what we can to help out and muck in when we need to. We're heading through the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area, and this question says, should I offer less than the advertised home price? You're more than welcome to make an offer below the asking price. You are legally allowed to make an offer below the asking price. What I'd suggest, though, however, is make sure you put it forward in such a way based on evidence that you have, or based on the required works that you feel that the property needs. When an estate agent values a property, they'll often look at comparable evidence. They'll have reasons that the property is going to the market at whatever price it is. However, you may well feel that it's not quite worth that value, and you're more than welcome to make an offer below the asking price. Bear in mind, when you do make an offer, it's the vendor's first probable kind of input from you towards the property. So you've got to make sure that you're not going to get their backup. You've got to make sure that it's being put in such a way, and the agent will do this for you, that it's understood why you're beginning at this position. And it is a negotiation after all. It might be a starting point for you, and it may well be that you're not trying to offend, you're just trying to put a marker in the sand as to where you kind of feel the property is worth. When we go out to value a property, we look at comparable evidence. So normally the asking prices are pretty accurate. However, there are some agents out there that don't bother with comparable evidence, and they'll often go with what the vendor just chooses to do. There's a risk associated with that, however, because a surveyor has to go and value the property at some point for the purchaser. And if they can't find comparable evidence like we need comparable evidence, it may well be that they'll downvalue the property, which in the long run means that that person will have to resell that property again, or find a buyer that doesn't need a mortgage, which there's not too many of those at the moment. So you can make an offer below the asking price. You are finding, however, in this market, it's still very competitive, and we're finding that often properties are selling in excess of asking price. On average, we're achieving around 102% on our asking prices. So that's something to bear in mind if you're looking to make an offer through ourselves. Top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. Next question, what role does a solicitor play? So a solicitor's engaged by you. You'll have them instructed to act on your behalf, but they also have an obligation to work for your lender if you're buying with a mortgage. Ultimately, they want to ensure that you're buying a property that's got everything about it that you are after. Okay, if there's any restrictions about that property, you need to be informed. If there's covenants that mean that in the future you couldn't park a van on the driveway and you're a plumber, then your solicitor needs to work these things through for you at the very, very beginning. They get paid upon completion. They often have abortive costs. So if you decide not to purchase the property you're going for, then they will still charge you. However, some offer a no move, no legal fee opportunity as well. So you'll need to find out at the earliest stage when you speak to your solicitor, do they charge a no move, no fee? And what is their cost? And is it going to come out upon completion? Get on their side. They're working on your behalf. They're very, very busy. You need to work alongside them. You need to work with them. But you also, I think, need to have regular communication with them to ensure that your file is towards the top of the pile all the time, because they're so busy and they're dealing with all these different inquiries from all these different sales they're working with. It's very important that you're front of mind for them. We also do sales progression with our offices. So we'll ensure that we're chasing them and enabling the answers to come back to you quicker, and also to get back to the other parties quicker. So solicitors are very important in the process, and we've got some great ones that we can recommend to you. Top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And this question says, what's the difference between fixed rate and variable mortgage? So a fixed rate is, as it sounds, it's a rate that is fixed for a period of time. So you'll have 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year, 10 year. You'll have it at fixed figure, fixed rates for a period of time. A variable is probably not recommended at the moment based on what the Bank of England base rates are doing, which is gradually they're increasing. A variable works above the Bank of England base rates. Now, there have been times where a variable option has been probably the best option. When rates got so low as 0.1% during the pandemic, a variable mortgage would have been able to track and stay low at that level as well. If you committed to a 3-year fixed prior to the pandemic, which most people had done, it's not to say that you didn't do the right thing at the time, you were still paying a very, very firm fixed rate, whilst rates would have been lower. There's nothing you could have done to have changed that unless you did a remortgage, which would have probably come with redemption penalties, and you'd probably be worse off overall anyway. So fixed rate at the moment would be our recommendation. If you need advice from a mortgage advisor, get in touch with our offices. We have great independent mortgage advisors that can help you with this, and they can advise you on what to go for. Top 40 questions asked by homeowners in the Worcestershire area. Next question, what insurance should I take out now that I'm a homeowner? So during the conveyancing process, your solicitor will probably insist that you actually take out buildings insurance, and it's often recommended to take out contents insurance as well. Now, the buildings insurance is obviously if there's a problem with the house over time, if it fell in a corner, or if something happened that was out of your control, then the buildings insurance is there to obviously ensure that the property could get rebuilt if it was that extreme, or that works could get remedied and rectified. So that would probably be enforced before you purchase your property. But if you are a homeowner, you may want to consider things like critical illness cover or life insurance. Now, those things are obviously sad subjects to consider and sad things to think about. However, with critical illness cover, what would happen is if you were diagnosed with an illness that is essentially classed within their listing, it's typical that the insurance would actually pay off your existing mortgage. It will be based on what you've agreed. It will be based on what insurance you've taken out. But if you're in a situation where unfortunately you weren't able to work any further, one concern of yours would be, how can I pay off this mortgage? And with things like critical illness or life insurance, you'll ensure that the rest of your family would obviously be looked after, and also that your home could be paid off. I'm not the insurance expert. We do have them. Our mortgage brokers actually offer insurance as well. So it's best to speak to them about what insurance would be best to you. I would say buildings insurance is an important one, and contents insurance is also recommended just in case you have anything in that home that you wouldn't want to have stolen, and would obviously be struggling to replace. It's worth getting that contents insurance for that very reason. Top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. How much will everything cost me each month, such as bills? Do I have to pay stamp duty? So when you're purchasing a property, you pay stamp duty once. It's a tax to the government. It kicks in at £125,000 and upwards. It starts at 2%, goes all the way through to 12%, and it's done in chunks. It basically goes up in segments. So stamp duty is a one-off payment. In terms of the other costs that you need to be aware of when you purchase a property, if you haven't lived on your own before, then you're going to be taking on costs that you're probably not used to, which include things like water, gas and electric. The other thing with your home, depending on its value, you'll have a council tax band rating. The higher the letter, the more expensive the council tax band. So if you go onto the government website in your local area, then you'll be able to find out what the council tax band is going to be for your property. You could also ask your estate agent, if you're buying a property currently, what the council tax band is going to be, and also what your monthly payments are going to be. Now, for council tax, you pay 10 months out of the 12. So you pay 10 months of the year out of 12, you get 2 months off. That's one thing you need to consider. The next payment obviously is going to be your mortgage. So if you have a mortgage on the property, that's a deal that you'll already be organising with your broker, and they will give you a fixed figure. Typically, if you're doing a fixed rate or if it's variable, be aware that it could go up and it could come down. Other than that, it's your normal bits and pieces, really. It is going to be your own bills, your food costs, anything else that you need, TV licenses and those bits and pieces. But stamp duty is a one-off payment at the beginning, and the bills will obviously be based on your consumption. Bear in mind, unfortunately, we have an energy crisis at the moment, and it's thought the prices are going to increase further. So be realistic when you're purchasing a property. Don't stress yourself out and don't stretch yourself too far to a point at which you're not going to be able to afford repayments. Come December time, when we think things are going to be colder, that's when the electricity prices, I think, are actually going to be increasing as well. That's something to bear in mind when you're purchasing the property. Next question, how much will my mortgage payments be? So we're being asked the top 40 questions by home buyers in the Worcestershire area, and we're working through on video format to give you answers to these questions. How much will my mortgage payments be? It's tricky to know. They'll be lower the higher the deposit you put in, I can tell you that much. So if you're going to check out banks and building societies, or if you're speaking to a broker like we have at our offices, then they will be able to advise you based on how much deposit you put down, what the repayments will be. Also bear in mind that the longer you take out a fixed rate deal, it could be that the rates are affected as a result of that as well. And also you can consider the time period in which you have your mortgage term over. So if you're a young, 30-ish-year-old first-time buyer looking to get on the ladder for the first time, you may choose to get your mortgage term over a period of 35 years. That is possible. Your fixed term might be for 2 of those 35 years, but your mortgage term could be over 35 years. Now, if you did it over 30 years, like with anything like a car loan, it would actually mean that the cost goes up as you reduce the number of years. So you make it more affordable by taking the term out to as long as you physically want to. I've done that myself before. I took a 35-year term originally. When I came to remortgage after 3 years, I was doing better in my business. I was able to then take my term from 32 years down to 27. So I essentially shaved 5 years off my lifespan of my mortgage, and it's something you could consider too. Keeps it more affordable at the beginning, and then as time goes on, as more income comes in, as your job progresses and hopefully you get pay rises, it means you can then reduce that term of the mortgage. Speak to your broker about this. We've got 2 independent brokers we work very, very closely with. We could be of any assistance on this, then let us know and we'll be happy to help out. We're being asked the top 40 questions by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And this question, what are management fees? Management fees typically will relate to leasehold premises, so flats and apartments as you'd normally imagine, but actually more and more new build developments also have management fees. So management fees on a new build development is for the upkeeps of the communal areas. So roads aren't always adopted by the council, therefore roadways need to be repaired by essentially the management committee or the management company. And this is what you'd be contributing to on a monthly basis. It's another factor to consider when you are purchasing a property. Management fees when it comes to a leasehold property like a block of apartments, it's for all of the communal areas. So very similar to like it is on a new build site, but with apartment blocks, the management fee would be for things like the buildings insurance, because it's a contribution towards the buildings insurance. It'll be towards maintenance. So if there's an issue with a certain area, the money would have been building up in a pot to pay those items off. It could be regular landscape gardening. It could be painting and decorating externally and internally. Basically, the management fees, your solicitor will be checking out what management fees you have to pay. If you are buying a leasehold property also, what your solicitor will be requesting is the accounts from the previous years. So they will be looking into whether there's a shortfall, in which case you can probably imagine that your cost is going to go up over time. And that's another great thing to have a solicitor for. They're going to help you to advise you on what you need to be aware of with those. We're heading through the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And the next question, what's the difference between leasehold and freehold? So we'll start with freehold. It's slightly easier to describe and explain. Freehold is fairly typical for most homes. It would mean that the homeowner, person that owns the property, owns the land that their property sits on. And there'll be a title with land registry that confirms what their boundaries are, and that's their freehold title. A leasehold property typically is sitting above land owned by a freeholder. So the land has to be owned by someone, but if you're in a flat, then you typically don't own the land underneath on the very ground floor. The ground floor flat doesn't own the title there either. It's typically a freeholder, which is often a separate entity. Now, if you are in a leasehold premises, there are are things to consider. Firstly, there's a term of that lease. So your lease will be for a period of time. It can be anything from really, typically they're above about 60 years nowadays. You do have some that are less than that, which is where your solicitor will probably advise you can be concerning for a lender and also for them. But you're finding that most leases are going to be 70 years plus. They get issued at the very beginning with the new builds at around 125. You sometimes get 999 or you get 99 years on those leases. Don't need to worry too much about those leases unless they are getting less than 60 years. That's where you'll find that most lenders have concerns, and your solicitor can advise you on that. Now, what you can do is you can extend the lease, or the existing homeowner can extend the lease. And sometimes this can be done as part of the purchase. So a person selling the apartment needs to extend their lease, but doesn't financially have the money available, bearing in mind it costs anything between £3,000 to £20,000. It may well be that they have a deal with the lease, with the freeholder, they can extend the lease upon completion. Something probably for another question. I'll be talking too long to go through it all right now for you. But the difference between leasehold and freehold, if you leasehold, you don't own the land that you're sat on. You're paying a freeholder a rent, a ground rent for that. But if it's a freehold, it's the title is yours. The land that it sits on is yours as well. Hope that helps. If you have more questions, if you want to delve a bit deeper with this one, then get in touch in the comments and we'll be happy to assist. Questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. Next question we have, how do you get a mortgage? There's a number of ways you can get a mortgage. Typically, you can go to your bank. That's one place that most people start, and that gives you a beginning point to know what your affordability is. Obviously, they're going to have an understanding of your incomings and outgoings, and they'll be able to advise you on what they can lend you. The thing to remember is they can only tell you what they can lend you. There is some 90 plus lenders out there that will lend you a mortgage. Not all will be perfect for your circumstances, but some, other than your own bank or building society, could be better for you. And that's why you're better off speaking to an independent broker that's got experience. We've got a couple of brokers ourselves. They're independent. They're not employed by us. You can even use them if you buy through another estate agent. It doesn't have to be related to Nicol Co specifically, but what you'll get from speaking to these people is an access to the whole of the market. They'll look at the whole deals, all the deals that are out there, and that'll help you to ensure that you're getting the very, very best possible rate. Rates are changing all the time. The Bank of England base rates raising at the moment, slowly but surely. It seems to be coming up month in, month out. So it's important that you do check to find out what the best rates are. They also have access, because of the way they lend so much with the brokers, they also have access to some exclusive rates. That means even if you went to the bank and it was your own bank, they might not be able to get the same rate that our brokers can get you. So it's worth having an independent chat, having second pair of eyes on it, a bit more advice to ensure you're getting the very, very best possible rate. This is going to be a big investment for you. You want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to save as much as possible. Next question, top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. When do you sort out a mortgage? It's recommended before you even start looking for a property that you try to get a mortgage decision in principle. Don't just do a calculator on the internet and then start viewing homes, because this could set you up for heartache, unfortunately. We've known cases where buyers have done an online calculator, put in everything they did correctly. However, the Bank of Building Society weren't taking into account their commission that they earn each month, or the bonus that they earned last year. So the best thing you can do is speak to a mortgage advisor as soon as possible, and do that before you start going out there and falling in love with properties. It also means that the agents can take you seriously, and we mean that in the nicest possible sense, but you're in a kind of a motivated stage that you're going down this track. If you haven't got agreement in principle yet, then actually they could show you around 15 homes, you could fall in love with all of them, and then we could find out it actually wasn't ever affordable to you. So best point to do it is get your mortgage decision in principle or agreement in principle at the earliest possible stage. We've got brokers ourselves if you need any assistance with this. There's no cost to get a mortgage agreement in principle, and it shows your commitment to obviously then go ahead with a purchase if you find the right home and get an offer accepted. Next question on the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. How long does my mortgage offer last for? You'll need to check with your bank or building society, because it can change between different lenders. However, it's typically 3 to 6 months that the mortgage offer lasts for. If you're buying a new build, this is something you need to consider, because there are actually some lenders out there that will offer mortgage offers for 9 or even 12 months on the basis of you buying a new build. So it's anything really, I guess, between 12 to 13 months. Now, if your mortgage offer is starting to come to an end, but your purchase isn't ready because the chain's not ready or the solicitor wasn't ready above, then you can apply to get a mortgage offer extension, something that your broker can do. It's easier to do it through a broker than trying to do it yourself. And they'll be aware of this, that broker, it's not because of your anything that you've done wrong. It's just, unfortunately, sometimes the conveyancing process is elongated at the moment due to chains and people not being able to find. So mortgage offer lasts anything between 3 to 6 months typically, but they can be with certain lenders longer than that. Next question, why do solicitors charge me for things that they print off? We're going through the top 40 questions asked by home buyers. I'll be honest with you, not all solicitors do charge. This may well be, unfortunately, a solicitor that you've chosen specifically that's charging, but it's not often the case with others. Clearly, there are costs for solicitors. They charge you a fee for their services, and there's also disbursements on top, things like money laundering checks, things like searches, and those items are chargeable. Charging you for printing is not something we all often hear of, and unfortunately, that might just be a solicitor that you've chosen that's in that process of doing that. Of course, a lot more things can be emailed nowadays. You don't have to have physical copies of everything. It may well be they can email it to you and you can print it your end at your cost. But unfortunately, yeah, I'm sorry to say that that may well just be an isolated incident based on your choosing. We're heading through the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And the next one we get to is, when do I need to pay everyone for the work? Now, as a purchaser, you typically don't need to pay the estate agent any fee at all. There are some agents that have been set up that actually will charge you as the buyer and don't charge their vendor. So be aware of that and make sure you check out, importantly, who you're going to be buying through. But typically, you don't pay an estate agent a fee. The fees that you are going to need to pay at the various different points are, firstly, for your mortgage survey. So when you have an offer accepted, you've had an agreement in principle already, you're now going to be committing towards the mortgage itself. You'll need to pay your broker or building society or bank for that mortgage survey to get carried out. You'll also need to put money on account with your solicitor. Typically, it's around £300, and this money is ready so they can apply for the searches. They can apply for the searches the minute that the draft contract gets sent across from the vendor solicitor. And if you're buying through us, you'll find, because of our ready to sell service, the draft contract gets sent out quicker, and therefore your searches can be underway sooner. Searches take anything between 2 to 6 weeks, so the sooner they can get underway, the better. Now, the next bit of money that you'll need to pay is going to be closer towards completion. You're going to need to pay your deposit over before you exchange contracts. So your deposit needs to be ready to go. If it's in an ISA, if it's in stocks and shares, make sure you get it out in good time prior to the exchange taking place, because you've got to put that money into your solicitor's account for the exchange. They may well also ask for things like their fees to be paid at that point as well. And at the very beginning, they'll give you an idea of their costings. And towards the end, when you're about to exchange, they'll give you what's called a completion statement. The completion statement will itemize the rest of the costs that you have. It'll be things like the stamp duty. It'll be things like their costs, their fees themselves, and any deposit you've said you're going to put down. So if you said you're buying with 10% deposit, that deposit needs to be transferred to your solicitor's account. They're not going to make money on it. It's not going to sit there gaining interest for them for a period of time. It's going to be there ready so that when the bank or building society send their money across for completion on the day of completion, they'll put your deposit with that money, and it will go through to the next person in the chain to buy the property you're looking to purchase. Hope that helps. If you have any other questions, drop in the comments box below. We're heading through the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And the next question I have, what do solicitors do all day? Great question. Well, they work hard. I know it might not feel like they work hard, but you can imagine that their caseload is not just acting for you on your purchase of the property or your sale of the property. A solicitor is also going to be acting for probably a further, well, I think an average kind of caseload is about 60 cases. And some parts of the transaction are more involved than others. It might well be that you're buying a property that's a leasehold property, and there'll be lots of checks they need to do based on the previous accounts, management accounts, or actually reading through the lease itself. What the solicitor is actually there to do is ensure that you're not buying something that's going to cause you a problem in the future. That's their whole agenda. They want to make sure that you're buying something that they actually would think would be comfortable for them to buy if they had to do it themselves. They're also acting on behalf of the lender. They have an obligation to the mortgage lender to ensure that you're buying something that is worth the money you're paying for that property, because it's at their risk. It's a lot of their money that's going into it. So I don't know if you've got a solicitor that's not communicating with you very well. It may well be that you want to speak to them a little bit more yourself to see if you can get a little bit more action, a bit more oomph from them. We have sales progressors in our offices, so they'll give you regular updates and let you know what your solicitor's doing all day. Hope that helps. Next question, will it affect my monthly repayments if I complete mid-month? Is it best to complete at the end of the month? Yes, it will affect your monthly repayments for that first month. So it may well be that when you come into the purchase of the property, that your lender or building society has decided that they'll take the 2 weeks up front for the first half of that month, and then it'll go on to the normal monthly payments. Typically you'll set a date, so you can set it for the beginning of the month or the end of the month, and it'll be a direct debit that typically goes out to your bank or building society. Your solicitor or broker can advise you on this. Now, I wouldn't suggest that you wait until the end of the month to move. Sometimes the bank or building society will actually not take the first payment from you until the end of the next month. So you could move in on the middle of the month. They don't take a payment that month. They'll take it 6 weeks worth of payment at the following month. Again, as long as your money's available for that, that's not something to concern yourself about. Just move at the timescale that you're happy with, and obviously that the chain are happy with. I wouldn't delay it in concern for what the monthly repayments are going to do. The monthly repayments will stay the same. It'll just be the first payment that might be slightly tweaked as a result. We're working our way through the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And the next one we have is a great one for me to answer. What does the estate agent do? So if this is a home buyer asking this question, we don't get paid by the home buyers, but the service that we provide is to enable your purchase to go through swiftly. And also some of the things that we do as an agent are bonuses on top, really, to make it a smoother transaction for you. And we hope that you'll remember this so that when you come to sell your property, you'll give us a look up again and we get the opportunity to work with you as a seller. So one of the things that we provide is a ready to sell service. This is unique. Essentially what we do is we book a consultation appointment for every single one of our homeowners when they're selling to meet with a chap called Simon Bishop. Simon was a solicitor himself, 40 years experience as a solicitor, and he's acted for a number, thousands of buyers and thousands of sellers over his time. So the reason we have this consultation appointment is to ensure that our vendors provide your solicitor with all of the correct documentation. It's a very important fact because if vendors are left to do it on their own, they often forget to include things, they often don't include things anyway, and it means that it drags out the process. So if you're buying from us, you're getting the benefit of this service at no cost to you. The ready to sell packs are held at our office. The point at which a sale is agreed, the pack goes over on the same day that the memorandum of sale gets there. So on the day that the solicitor gets instructed, they receive all the paperwork. Now, often this takes up to 2 weeks. So we're already getting you 2 weeks head start on everyone else. Now, once the vendor solicitor receives this pack, they can then put together what's called a draft contract, and the draft contract needs to get sent to your solicitor so that your solicitor can start doing things like searches. Once this is all underway, you'll get a call from our team. It'll be one of our sales progressors to introduce themselves. You'll have a dedicated sales progressor throughout the whole process. They won't be out doing physical appointments, valuations, viewings, or any of that at the same time. They are 9 to 5:30s, always doing sales progression. And that's great for you because it gives you some consistency. This may be the first time you've ever bought a property, so you're going to have one person you can rely on to get the answers. They also are there to help this transaction along. They're not just phoning to get updates to feed you information. They actually need to push solicitors a little bit themselves. There's situations where you contact a solicitor and you bring it to their attention that you've not heard from them for over 3 days and you want to know what's going on. They tell you they'll get to the file. If you phone them the next day, they'll tell you again they'll get to the file. But what we do is we'll continuously chase them to make sure that this file is being looked at and progressed. We get our sales through a lot quicker than other estate agents in general. I mean, there will be some cases where there's some quick sales from other agents as well, but it's as a result of these services that we can make sure your purchase goes through in a timely fashion. The other thing is it's a stressful process. Sometimes you need some help, advice, guidance, assistance, shoulder to cry on. We do all of that for you as home buyers. So if you're buying through us, hopefully you'll enjoy the process. When it comes to you selling in the long run, please remember us and hopefully get to act for you as a vendor. Top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. This next question is, do I need to pay for brokers on top of everything else? That's subject to the broker that you're using. Typically, yes, you do need to pay a broker. If you go to your bank or building society, you'll often need to pay for a mortgage valuation fee, but a broker's service is in addition to the mortgage valuation fee. But I'll be honest, it's worth it. Having moved house a number of times myself, there's huge benefits to not doing all the running around yourself. If you do it directly with your bank or building society, you may have someone who's looking after your account, but typically it's you that then has to go chasing things up, getting onto the call centres, submitting your paperwork yourself and all those bits and pieces. And if you have a broker, the fee that you're paying them is for them to do that for you. Often they have admin support. So rather than your broker being tied up on the phone for 40 minutes or you being tied up on the phone for 40 minutes, they have team members that can do that for them. And this genuinely gets things through quicker as well. It depends on your affordability. Clearly, if you are very, very tight in terms of what you have as budget, then you might not be able to afford the broker's fee on top. However, I've used it myself over the years, and I think it's massive, massive value. You'll often find brokers also do a forever fee as well. So they call it like a lifetime fee. So you pay them for the first time you purchase a property, you pay them their broker's fee. But then when you come to do your remortgage 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years down the line, they'll be back in touch with you to remind you that the remortgage is coming up, and they'll do that without any cost. The other great thing a mortgage broker can find for you is the best insurance for your needs. So you can check with them what your requirements are, whether it's critical illness or life insurance or contents and buildings insurance, but they can look at competitive rates on that. So often you do have to pay a broker. It's not a massive amount considering the amount of work they have to do, but it's worth it in my opinion. Speak to a broker, find out at the very early stage how much it costs. To get an agreement in principle, they often don't charge. To start the process, they don't charge. Some ask for the money upon completion. Some ask for the money when they're going to submit the application for you. You need to find out what your broker wants to do on that. We're answering the top 40 questions asked by purchasers in the Worcestershire area. And this question is, Is there a limit to how long a chain can be? In truth, no, there isn't a limit to how long a chain can be. And I've known chains as long as 7 go through in a timely fashion. There's a lot of work involved when the chains get longer because there's a lot more moving parts. And as I said, there is no limit to how long these chains can be. Often what you'll find, however, is that someone within the chain will often decide they can break the chain. So that might mean that they're going to move out and move in with family for a little while, go into rented accommodation, or just go into a second home that they already own. So chains are reliant upon every moving part. And clearly, the longer the chain, the more risk there is. If it's a short chain, 1 to 2 to 3, then it can go through very, very quickly. If it's a first-time buyer or someone who's got nothing to sell buying a property that's got no onward chain, it can go through super quick, subject to solicitors and bits and pieces. But the longer the chain, the more work it takes. Now, we've got sales progressors, as I've mentioned in previous questions gone by. Our sales progressors won't just look after our vendor and our home buyer. They'll also go up the chain to speak to the agents involved and also down below if required. That's great news for you because it means that we're not just focused on our single part. We're looking at all the moving parts within the chain. So no limit to how long a chain can be. Often I haven't seen many go above 7, and even those that have got 7 links have gone through in a timely fashion. It's all about how well people work within that chain and what the involvement is from the agents and what they're willing to do. Next question, top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And this question says, can I pull out of the purchase at any point? In truth, you can. It's advised if you are going to withdraw from a purchase that you do it at the earliest position, at the earliest opportunity. If you exchange contracts on a purchase, you will actually be in a financial loss if you decide to back out of the contract. You'll be breaking the contract. Your 10% deposit, which has been lodged, or whatever deposit you've put down, is then going to be left to the seller. So one thing to be very aware of is make sure you are fully committed before you pass your deposit money over and before you exchange contracts. It's tricky. It might just be that you've got a few wobbles or a few concerns. I'll be very honest with you. Take advice from your solicitor if there's something that's concerning you significantly. They can hopefully put your mind at rest. And also, if you have a good relationship with the estate agent you're buying through, you could be honest with them as well. It may be that you've seen a problem that no one else has seen or actually isn't really there. And it might just be that you need the benefit of some experience to help you with that decision. If you do pull out of a purchase, you may well find that you've got solicitors' fees as well. They're called abortive costs that you'll need to pay. And that would be something you'd need to consider as well at the beginning or when you're purchasing the property. So hopefully you don't need to pull out the purchase. You can at any point, but if you do it after an exchange of contracts, then you're going to lose your deposit. And I would not recommend that happening. Top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. Next question, do I need to pay the deposit all in one go? It depends on what deposit you're going to exchange on. So your solicitor would have had agreement in the chain of how much deposit needs to be exchanged on. It could be that you've got 40% deposit, but you're only in your chain going to exchange on 10%, which is fairly typical, in which case you only need to get that 10% over your solicitor at that point. But make sure that you do have the rest of the money ready to go across because that will be required before the completion takes place. In terms of paying it all in one go, some banks or building societies limit you to how much you can transfer. It might be that you can only make £25,000 payments each day unless you go into the branch. So if you've got an exchange coming up on Friday, you might need to start making those payments on Tuesday to ensure that all the money that needs to get to your solicitor is there in a timely fashion. It's recommended. I think most people would pay it all in one go, but completely up to you. Your solicitor will obviously need that money though before the completion because otherwise you'll actually fall foul of the contract and that could cause you some concern. So there we are. If you have any other questions on this subject, please drop them into the comments box below. Next up in the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area is what's a mortgage broker? So mortgage brokers are typically independent and some of them are with a panel. So they have a panel of different lenders that they can go to and others are whole of market. Whole of market broker, for obviously the great reasons, means that they're going to have access to all the different lenders out there. They are likely to find you the very, very best possible rate. Someone who's only got access to a certain number, i.e. a panel, they might have access to 10, 15, 32 different lenders and they aren't going to be able to give you the best advice. You want to go to someone who's going to have the whole of the market, look for everything that's physically possible for you, and then report back in terms of what lender would be best for your situation, your circumstances. We're looking at the top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. And this question says, do I need to pay everything in one go or do I pay 10% deposit first and the rest later? Well, it depends on your deal that the solicitors organise with the chain actually, because it may well be that you're exchanging on 5% deposit, could be 10% deposit. It typically is around 10%, in which case you do need to get that 10% deposit to your solicitor for the exchange to take place, but the rest of the mortgage monies and also your deposit have to be in place before the day of completion. Your solicitor will be nervous if you left it until the day of completion to send those monies over. So our recommendation is to send that money sooner. Now, it's not sitting in a high interest account. They're not going to be sitting on £40,000 of your money and making money on that. It's going to be sat in an account ready to go, so that the minute the completions come in, they put your deposit with the borrowing from the bank or building society, and therefore you purchase the property, and you'll get a call from the agent to let you know when the keys can be collected. Top 40 questions asked by home buyers in the Worcestershire area. The next one is, when do I need to pay my mortgage? So your mortgage will be set up to go out on a direct debit or standing order. This is typically either at the beginning or at the end of the month. And when you sign for the deal and get your mortgage offer, you'll often suggest which date you want to work that from. So it could be the 2nd of every month, because you know you get paid on the 1st. It will be regular as clockwork. It will just keep going through. And if you have any insurances, you'll probably find that they will also go through at the same time. On the day of completion, it will often be that you'll pay the following date. So if it was the 15th that you completed on and you were going to need to make your first payment from the 2nd, it could be that that money gets totaled up to the 2nd, so you're paying from the rest of that first month on the 2nd. Or it can often be that they actually let you have the whole of the first 6 weeks without paying, and then the following 2nd you pay for that 6 weeks. It depends on your bank building society. Your broker will be able to advise you on it, but it's a monthly payment that continues. If your fixed deal, if you're on a 2-year or 3-year fixed deal, comes to an end, be aware that if you go into a variable rate, the rate will often go up higher. So your repayments will change very quickly. Now, what we recommend is 4 months out before you're due to finish your 2-year or 3-year or 5-year fixed deal, you speak to your broker again and you look to do what's called a remortgage. You look at new deals that are out there in the market to see what the new borrowing should be. They'll get that to fall in line. So on the day when your fixed deal comes to an end, your new deal begins and the new payments will start thereafter. Hope that helps. If you have any other questions, please pop them in the comments box below or get in touch with the offices and we'll be more than happy to assist.